It is 10 o'clock, so I think we shall begin. Good morning, everyone. I would like to begin by welcoming everyone to this meeting of the Assets and Procurement Committee here at Newshire Hall and everyone watching on YouTube. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left. Item number 1, apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Nethsinger with Councillor Graham-Wilson substituting, and apologies from Councillor David Ambrose-Smith with Councillor Anne Hay substituting.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Councillor Bywater.
Just, I'm the local member for the Stibbington item. That's just for information, really.
Thank you. Item number 2, minutes and action log. We're being asked to approve the minutes of the committee meeting held on 15 October 2024 as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only, can I see? Okay, thank you. I see no objections, so we will take that as carried unanimously. Sorry, on that, yeah, fine, sorry. Attached to the minutes is an action log. Do officers have any updates?
Yes, thank you. We have several updates to report. Action 20, this land publication of shareholders agreement. The training was provided to members at the start of January 2025. Therefore, this action is complete. Action 60A, the County Farms Working Group met on the 9th of December 2024 and will do so quarterly going forward. Therefore, this action is also complete. Action 63, update on the disposal of Old Shire Hall. A report is scheduled to be brought to this committee on the 7th of March 2025. Action 68B, accommodation improvement program. Members expressed concern over public transport options to Audrey House. A travel plan will be produced for all hub and spoke office buildings retained, which will include details of the public transport options available to colleagues who attend Audrey House. This action remains in progress and updates will be provided once a plan has been produced. And finally, Action 69, employee benefits contract. Seeking suppliers who offer cost-beneficial packages will form part of the procurement specifications once the procurement plan is approved and underway for our employee benefits contracts. And this action remains in progress.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Count.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mine's not a specific one, but I serve on a number of committees, and it just seems to me that for various reasons, this committee has an awful lot of in progress and open actions, and I was wondering if perhaps we could have a little bit more, let's see if we can get some off the list by the next meeting, please, Chair.
Noted. That sounds like I will do my best. So any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
I was just going to reinforce Steve's comments. It's still excellent to hear the updates from officers about how progress is getting on. This is the first time that I would have sat on this committee and I was noticing how many actions there are in progress or still to be completed. It would, at the very least, if we can't get them off the agenda next time, could we put some dates by which time we're expecting things to have been completed? Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions? We are therefore asked to note the action log. Item number 3, petitions and public questions. We've received no petitions or public questions, in which case I'll move on to item number 4, Mill Road Library update. Could I remind members that the appendices in this report are exempt and we will need to move into confidential session if you have detailed questions relating to them. Are members likely to want to discuss materials mentioned in the exempt appendices? At this stage, we will endeavour to keep this item in public session. can I ask Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director of the Property Services, to present this report, which is on page 21 of your confidential agenda pack. Following this, I will invite the local member to speak before moving to debate.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. Committee members will be aware that we brought a report to the 15th of October A&P Committee that resolved to approve and accept bidder 1 as the preferred bidder for the Mill Road Library, and delegated authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources to agree terms, execute the documentation and complete the disposal in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. This report provides an update of progress in the disposal since that date. The heads of terms were agreed and signed by both parties on the 3rd of December. The heads of terms are included as a confidential Appendix 1 to this report. These are not legally binding, but these terms represent the next step in the sale, providing clear guidance for legals to base the sale contractually. The building was opened to the public on the 7th of December and the purchaser was present, and we had approximately 60 visitors from the community. The Appendix 2 provides a confidential update report which reflect the outcomes of discussions and negotiations that have happened post-committee and include changes from the original bid approved at the previous committee. The details of the changes within the Appendix 2 will be required to be discussed within closed session. The purchaser and the local county councillor ward member have held an introductory meeting. Officer recommendation is to continue to proceed, taking note of any changes with the revised bid from bidder 1 for the reasons discussed and approved at previous committee. As although current negotiations have resulted in a change to the original offer, the proposed future use of the building has not changed, and this remains the best consideration for the council, taking account of the financial considerations that it will reduce the council's ongoing financial liability for an asset it no longer requires for service use and results in a capital receipt to support service delivery and the capital programme. The ability of the bidder to complete and the divestment by the council from holding costs of the building and what would be ongoing revenue running and maintenance costs, which are not sustainable as the council has no operational use for the building. When contracts are hopefully exchanged, it will enable a purchaser to bring the current unused building back into use for creative arts and the community benefit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I turn to the committee, the local member for Petersfield, Councillor Howard, would like to speak on the item and will be joining us via Zoom. Excellent.
I am here, Councillor Haythorne, but somebody has to allow the video to come on.
Lovely. So if I could remind you, you have 5 minutes. The traffic light indicator will turn amber, and when there are 30 seconds remaining. So at that point, I will indicate verbally that you have 30 seconds remaining, and then I'll indicate again at the 5-minute mark. Okay. Thank you very much. If you'd like to begin.
Well, first of all, thank you to Councillor Haythorne for taking this item quickly so I could take part because of time issues this morning, and also to Democratic Services. And also thank you to officers and indeed to the preferred bidder who did indeed meet me, and we had what I thought was a good and productive meeting. He may be watching at this point, so I want to place that on record. I am in a strange position. I'm not going to comment, of course, on any of the details in the confidential appendices, but I'm also not even able to say publicly his name, when in reality he met 50 or 60 people on the Mill Road Winter Fair Day, and it's widely circulated in the community. That's a strange quirk of our confidentiality rules. I'm not complaining about that, but the quicker that we can get it out into the public sphere without restriction, the better it is. And it is important to say there's a trust issue in my ward from some of my constituents. Now 3,000 people have signed the petition that were against the sale in the first place. And I think we should acknowledge the strength of feeling that is there and to try and be as transparent as possible. And I appeal to the officers again to say as much as you can in public session about the changes and the negotiations, because I have constituents that are asking that and believe that there should be more transparency. in the process. My questions to the officers, and I want to say very clearly, I don't question the good faith of the preferred bidder at all. But I do think this is a building we're selling, and it's right that we can use our influence in the sale to assure the future use of the building is in full spirit and letter of the pledges that have been made to us in the bid. And so I would be grateful if the officers could say more this morning about the restrictions that are being put in the documentation to ensure that all of the community use aspirations of the bidder are honoured. As I say, I don't question his good faith, but it's proper for us to get that detail right, and also to confirm that this building will remain an asset of community value. So I don't think anyone would hope that it's then resold on in quick fashion. I think the committee will want this project to work. But just again, if that were to happen, can the officers say whether the building remains an asset of community value? So there will be similar restrictions at that point of its use. And over that enforceability of the pledges that have been made, I asked my colleague members sitting there in the room to ask questions and to raise concerns about that, because that's where I want us to, as a county council, do our very best possible in the process. Finally, Chair, the preferred bidder did very kindly agree to meet the second, or two representatives of the second bidder when I met him, which I'm grateful if the officers facilitate, and I'll try and facilitate myself, because I think that there are opportunities, and by the way, the preferred bidder thinks there are opportunities for elements of the people and the activities that were involved in that second bid to become involved. And I think that's in everyone's interest for that to take place. And although there have been some nervousness, let's say, over the process and concerns about the process, which we just have to acknowledge that was there and is there. If we can try and foster a relationship between elements of the second bidder and the first bidder, fully respecting the absolute right of the first bidder to make his own choices about what will be his own building, then that will be, I think, in his interest. He said it's in his interest to do that. And so that is something that I very much want to happen in the near future. Thank you again for all the cooperation from officers and indeed from members to me on this crucial issue in my division. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning.
Thank you. There are some questions raised there. Could we get some responses, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, abiding with the confidentiality, some of the changes we cannot go into in open session in detail. However, the confirmation that when this report came through committee in October, the end use put forward by the bidder and discussed has not changed. There's still a commitment there for community use and creative arts. As Councillor says, the purchaser is very willing, in fact, is keen to form relationships with the local and community beyond that. Obviously, that is key for him to have a successful business in that site, if approved. Just one comment to pick up, I think, around the ACV. The current ACV runs to 2029. It's a 5-year process. So at the end of 2029, it would have to be reapplied for, but that's currently in place and is a process that goes through, as we know, through the City Council in terms of that approval. Other than that, I'm not sure, without going into confidentiality, we can go into any more detail of the changes that were brought forward, which obviously committee members are aware of through that confidentiality paper.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed within the report it did mention a problem with water ingress and that there were surveys being done. I presume these surveys have now been completed. It does go on to say that any maintenance of the property to put these right will be done. Do we know the cost and the nature of the work that needs to be done? And is this likely to put in jeopardy the bid that's been put forward?
Sorry, that item is in the confidential appendix. Are there any other questions? Councillor Beckett.
Thank you, Chair. So again, I kind of want to keep this out of confidential session if we can. So do tell me if I skirt too close to the confidentiality parts here. I want to echo what Councillor Howard has said about things. Now, those of you probably don't know, I got into politics because of a dodgy developer in London that would promise the earth and then not deliver it and go back on their word every single time. So while I do not know this developer at all and I have never met them and I don't want to fully question their integrity, it is something that I am aware of and very cautious about when it comes to third parties developing things. So like Councillor Howitt, I do wonder whether we can say in open session at all what could be done, what is possible to be able to limit this building's future use, because I think all of us here would not like to see it being flipped and sold on and then used for other commercial properties. I think everybody that's been involved can see that was being put forwards as a art space. I think most people will get behind its use as an art space. The concern here is about future use and what a developer could do with it after that. So I don't know whether there's any reassurance that you can give us on that or things we can say without going into confidential session. Not necessarily what you might do, but what the possible is. It might be possible to say. The other slight thing that I would like to say here is obviously the elephant in the room here is the government's proposals for a unitary council. So can I just double check that we have gone and spoken to our partners and are confident that in the event that this council were subsumed into a unitary council, that there wouldn't be a need for this building at that point? And do we have confidence that that is the case? Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, just picking up the points. I think at the previous committee there were some conditions required from committee that have been inputted into the heads of terms without going into detail for obvious reasons in terms of restrictions going forward. In terms of the point you made around the City Council, they were discussed. It was discussed with City Council at the start of this process to see if they have any need for the building, and they expressed they didn't. At this point in time, there's been no recent discussions with City Council on the back of the local review that's coming, government review, but they were included in the original scope for do you have the use of this building going forward? So they have been considered at the early stage. Was there any other questions that I missed?
I think that was mostly it. Without going to private session, it is quite difficult to discuss those extra conditions then and whether they are sufficient. I don't know whether others want to talk about that or not.
Councillor Hay, did you want to speak? No, fine, okay. Okay. Well, are there any? So I guess it was is there any broad brush question there that you could get an answer out of, which would be not confidential?
I presume the bit on what the outcome of the survey would not be confidential.
I think through you, Chair, all efforts are being made with the bidder to ensure the longevity of the building, and that's been part of the negotiations around the heads of terms and some of the conditions related to the building itself, and has been party to that conversation and that progressing of the way forward to ensure that that building is a sound building going forward, if that is helpful.
Councillor Gough, did you indicate, or did I make that up? Would anyone else have a question? Would anyone else like to debate this item? Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try very, very hard to stay outside the confidential area. I think that in the confidential area, there are changes that are mentioned. So I think for some of the questions, it would be helpful to say that there are no changes because they're not in the confidential bit, because you wouldn't put in a change. The impact of restrictions, covenants, etc., on future use of the building was heavily discussed at the last committee meeting. I raised the fact that a lease lease sale gives you more protection than a freehold sale, but it was voted through under those conditions that were available last time, and there aren't any changes there. So we're discussing whether realistically, under the same terms, barring things that are mentioned, whether this should go ahead. So the main thing I want to discuss, not discuss actually, is to make you aware of that the changes that are encapsulated in the paper have some rationale attached to them. And I don't believe the rationale. I believe that this county council, through its officers and the political joint administration, have a certain amount of reason to be blamed for any changes that did or did not that did occur. To that effect, because I wanted in public session to go on record to saying where I place some of the blame, but I can't go into detail. I have taken this up with Stephen Moyer. I've made him aware of my concerns, the specific details of why I believe that the things have changed potentially because of actions of the county council. It is up to Stephen Moore now to launch an investigation to see if there's any truth to that and to consider the output of that, whether it should be advised to the committee. We shall have to wait and see. Obviously, I could be proved wrong, but I've made Stephen Moore aware, and I don't do that lightly. So we shall wait and see. But there's no point me going into confidential session and threshing it out there, because that isn't something that we can get to the bottom of or identify whether anything needs to change in the future. But I have made you aware. Obviously, Michael, Stephen will be in contact with you with my concerns, and yourself, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I do not know the content of your concerns. Would anybody else like to speak? In which case, we will move to the report recommendations. The committee is invited to A, note progress towards the sale of the former Mill Road Library, B, agree the revised terms, C, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources to agree terms, execute the documentation and complete the disposal in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Assets and Procurement Committee. I think it is probably wise to move to a vote. So could I ask for those in favour of the recommendations to raise their hands? Okay, thank you. That is carried unanimously. Moving on to item number 5, disposal of Stibbington. Could I remind members that the appendix to this report is also exempt, and we will need to move into confidential session if you have detailed questions relating to it. Are members likely to want to discuss materials mentioned in the exempt appendix? Not so far. In which case, can I ask Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director for Property Services, to present this report, which is on page 35 of your confidential agenda pack.
Thank you, Chair. This report considers the disposal of the Grade 2 listed building formerly used by Cambridge County Council as Stibbington Outdoor Centre. The preferred bid for the freehold of the site on an unconditional basis is over the value for officer delegation threshold and therefore requires committee approval today. The building was given a Grade 2 listing in February 2024. Items 2.6, 2.7, 2.8 within the report covers some of the issues of the site in regard to an expiry of a planning consent and the archaeological interest at the site. CYP committee on the 17th of January 2023 approved the closure of the centre, and it has not been operationally used by the council since the 31st of August 2023. Item 3.2 informs of the considerations of the site and the process to deem the site surplus to future council use aligned to the disposal policy. Items 3.3 and 3.4 inform of the options which were considered for leasing the building as well as marketing with the potential for planning consent for development and the reasoning for officers discounting these. The site was marketed in June 2024. We were flexible in offering as potentially 2 plots or as 1 plot to see what the market brought forward. Marketing particulars were linked to item 3.5 within the report. We received 9 bids, 7 of which for the whole site as 1 lot. Bids were assessed on a 40 deliverability and funding and a 60 financial offer scoring basis. Confidential Appendix 1 details the bids received, whilst this is also summarised within the report in Table 1. Within item 3.9 of the main report, bidder 9 is our preferred bidder. If approved today, both parties are committed to completion before the end of this financial year. Item 6.1 and 6.5 informs regarding the holding costs and potential refurbishment costs which we would have had to carry out as a Grade 2 listed building, as well as adhering to the Council's net zero targets. We recommend committee to review and approve bidder 9 as the preferred bidder going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn to the committee, I invite the local member for Sawtry and Stilton, Councillor Bywater, if you would like to speak on the item. If so, you have 5 minutes and the amber light will come on when there are 30 seconds remaining.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Chris and officers, for preparing this report. I don't propose to speak for 5 minutes on this actually, because it's quite remarkable. It's very rare that I come to committee and actually agree fully with officers' papers. Really, I think this is long overdue. You know, CYP made a decision about the future of the building a couple of years ago, and you know, this is quite pleasant to see that this process has taken place. Again, I guess it just comes back to the question about the longevity of it and, you know, the future of local government and where it pans in relation to that. But having looked at the confidential paper, I've got no concerns. I actually agree with what's taken place. I'm quite excited by the proposals, to be fair, and without going in for information in that, I may actually benefit from some learning from it as well. So, and it's also good to see the progress, and the building will, you know, keep its significant charm within the local amenity. So, yeah, thank you very much, Chair and officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bywater. I will now ask members of the committee whether they have any questions on the report for Chris. Councillor Count.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In 3.1, we learned that on the 17th of January 2023, the CMYP committee approved the closure of the centre. And in 3.5, we learned that the property was marketed in June 2024. Can you give me an explanation of how you can get through a 17-month timeline between a decision to close and actually getting a property on the market? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The date frame for this, as you say, 3.1 says that the committee on the 17th of January 2023 took that decision. The service didn't actually come out of the building until the 31st of August 2023. At that point, we then need to go through the disposal policy in terms of deeming it surplus. So we offer it around the council for other use first, and then go through the process that's in the disposal policy. At that point, we did do some due diligence with agents in terms of what route we should take for marketing, and that's covered in the report in terms of other options, until we finally went out to market, as we did in June 24.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to me that there isn't a logic that these should be sequential. So in January 2023, you make a decision that something's going to stop. Then in August of 2023, when it stopped, you then started the next process. It doesn't seem to me that that should have happened after the service has stopped using it. You could have started it on the day after the committee on January the 18th. Furthermore, after they'd come out, you went through the disposal process. A decision was made to get rid of the building. All of this could have been done. In the meantime, the buildings had to be maintained, the rates had to be paid. There's a cost to the county council. I don't hear from the response why these had to be sequential and why they couldn't be started when the decision was made. Thank you.
I think all I can say further to my earlier comment is I'll take that away, and with the team we'll look at any lessons learned from that.
And if you could report any lessons back, that would be greatly appreciated. Are there any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
I've got 3 questions. One very simple. In 3.2, I think you mean Huntingdonshire District Council, not Huntingdon District Council, not to be confused with Huntingdon Town Council. In 3.3, I'd like some clarification as to the leasing option. The leasing has been written off on the basis that the energy rating isn't adequate and quite a lot of investment, although it's not said how much investment would be required. If somebody was buying the property, would they not want to improve the energy rating anyway? In which case, why can't we do it? And then the third question, which I think is the more significant one for Michael, in 3.1, it talks about if the closure is agreed, CYP have suggested that the money should be earmarked to support the investment and sustainability of Burwell House and Grafham Water. I think that that's probably a good aim to do. Rather like Section 106 receipts, they are earmarked to improve certain things. And whilst I can accept that capital receipts can go into the general pot, in this particular case, we're looking to improve other similar places. And I would have thought that that was a perfectly reasonable expectation of CYP to suggest. So I'm interested in those three comments, please.
So if Chris wants to answer the first two questions, is that your expectation?
I think the first question was, yes, it is an omission on 3.2. It should have been Huntingdoneshire. So, and I think I'll pass to Alina to ask the second one.
Hi. The EPC is obviously rated at a level G, and because the property is listed.
You make sure you speak closer to the microphone, please.
Can you hear me? So the EPC is obviously rated at a level G, and because the property is also listed, there are obviously various associated costs in terms of trying to lift up the level of the EPC rating to be able to lease the property. So in order for us to lease the property, it must be at least a level E. The costs associated with the property, there's various other issues there in terms of the terrapin buildings being at the end of their economic life, and obviously require demolition and demolition costs associated with that. And then the building itself, where the EPC is related to, you've got sort of various costs associated within being able to uplift the rating level. There's an EPC report that comes with the recommendations, and although we didn't necessarily cost them, some of the major ones were the oil tank change and sort of roof insulation. There are various other issues, but because of the overall costing of the site, we felt it wasn't necessarily economic in terms of being able to use the site, and because of the listing and other associated issues, we felt it would be time consuming as well.
Oh, just before Michael comes in on the third point, whilst I accept all that, and then doing something about the terrapin buildings is probably not relevant if they're going to be demolished, but is a purchaser not going to want to do all those things anyway? So why should we do them, or why shouldn't we do them, and at least keep that option on the table? And what would it cost to actually do all this improvement?
I think from the perspective, we felt that the costs associated with it would be that it's something that maybe the purchaser might do but they would probably put into their costs going forward as part of the old property. Whereas because we operationally didn't feel it was viable and necessarily proposed as being viable in terms of all the works involved, so this provided the best option in order to obtain capital receipt.
I'm sorry, I hear what you say. You still haven't told me how much.
Sorry, no service need. Sorry, operational, no service need.
Okay.
And presumably there's no aspiration to become a landlord in this instance.
No, I think also associated because of the nature of the age of the property and like with Mill Road, the ongoing costs, and there's an unknown element in terms of it being old property. And in order to get it to that level, we felt that where there was no service need, so we didn't understand why we would do that in terms of maintaining it. If there was a service need, it would have obviously provided us with a different outlook.
Without putting words into your mouth, presumably bearing in mind that different bidders had different intentions for it, not knowing what the future use of it would be, I guess there is an unknown, if you don't have a tenant in mind with a long-term contract, then you're not going to be able to do the retrofitting work appropriate to that tenant in order to then guarantee the revenue. Are you happy? Should we move on to the final question?
Thank you, Chair. First point to note is I wasn't the Section 151 officer at the time when this came forward. The standard practice is that all receipts, whether it is from Service A or Service B, go to the capital programme in terms of receipts. And the capital programme then has a bidding process, as it were, going into the budget setting round and beyond, because capital can be at any time of year. And the finance team therefore manage the Treasury pot very carefully in terms of what we can invest and borrow and how we manage that to the best effect for the council. And as part of that process, what we don't want to do is have a situation where Service A retains their receipts and Service B and C and so on does. We have a long established capital bidding process. And certainly the two other outdoor ed centres, Burwell and Graffham, will need investment over the coming periods. But the Children and Young People's Directive, in terms of the future strategic direction of that, will then help drive that process in terms of the capital bidding. So certainly as that comes forward, and costs, if they are in excess of the purchase price here or the capital receipt, they would be funded from that capital funding process, which is likely to require borrowing, and therefore, what we're trying to do is manage the overall capital pot in terms of all the receipts, but not set a precedence where we are ring fencing, which will draw away that ability to manage the Treasury arm of our business.
Councillor Gough.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I think Councillor Cow asked a very reasonable question about the lessons to be learned from the timeline. I just would like to make sure that when the officers look at that, they also look at the elapsed time between June 24, when the property was marketed, to now, when we're making a decision, until closure. It seems like that to me is also quite an extended period of time. And if there's one lesson to be learned from these properties, is you have to strike while there's competitive intensity. And it would be good to see whether there was any opportunity for us in future situations to accelerate that too as well.
Could I turn that into a question as well as potentially an action? Was there a specific reason for the delay between June 24 and now? What was the reason for that period of time?
I don't think there's any particular reason other than marketing and going through the due course. I mean, it's always a definitive of how long you market certain things for. The issues of this site and marketing, to be honest, was quite straightforward. So in terms of taking Councillor Gough's point, again, lessons learned, we will go away. The other issue is obviously fitting into the committee process to bring it through to committee in terms of timescales. So this has been ready to come to committee for a little bit of time, and we have to do that accordingly. So picking up Councillor Gough's point, we will take that away. We will look at lessons learned and probably be more prescriptive in terms of the timeframes, and look at registering that in line with the committees.
Yeah, and I think actually in that spirit, if that's the reason, we should think about being a little bit more flexible for the operation of the committee. If we're driving the commercial processes, doesn't strike me as that's a good thing.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, it's, we're responsible for that. If we need to get it on the agenda because it's going to save the council money, then absolutely, totally agree. I have got one question for you, and it's probably minor in the scheme of things, but this site has been, I can speak from behalf of being the chair of the CYP committee many years ago, how expensive it's been to keep going, and ultimately why CYP made the final decision about it. But it's got the classroom inside the building has got significant historic value. I don't know if anybody's been in there, but it's reminds me of a Victorian school. What's going to happen with that historic furniture in there? And can it be put to use elsewhere? Because it has got significant historic value.
I think we need to get back to you on that. Thank you.
If I could add, it would be extremely disappointing if anyone was to walk past and see it in a skip. So, and that would not be the first time that has happened. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. And this is a question to Michael Hudson. I'm hoping that he can help accommodate what I think is a governance issue that's come up in the meeting. So in the paper and in response to Councillor Graham, we were talking about the recommendation of a Children and Young People's Committee and then normal policy being applied. Now, I've checked up on the committee notes, and they actually had a recommendation to put to the, it says, I'll read it out. If the closure is agreed, a proposal to be made to the Strategy and Resources Committee for the earmarking of the capital receipt to support the investment and sustainability of Burwell House and Grafton Water. Now, in my understanding of the Constitution, there's a certain hierarchy of decision making and delegations. So you have full council as the strategic direction, and then things are delegated to committees. And when a committee makes a decision, that is an instruction to officers to behave in a certain way. And this committee decision was to refer something to the Strategy and Resources Committee. Now, instead of that, from what we have in the paper in front of us today and from the response, is Michael Hudson has said the normal policy is just to put it in the pot and we'll handle it with that way. Now, that's fine with me, Michael. I have no problems with that whatsoever. But I don't think that the actual decision to do that can be handled in this way. I think actually, because you have a recommendation from the CNYP committee, what you actually need is the question to go to the S&R committee. And then you, as an officer, provide advice and say, I believe that the correct process for this would be to put it into the pot. And that way we maintain the delegation of who is responsible for what. And it's actually now, because of this earlier recommendation, an S&R decision and not a Section 151 officer decision. Could you help me and just say yes, and we'll tackle that? Thank you.
I can't just say yes because it's slightly a bit more complicated than that, because obviously the Strategy and Resources Committee that it was recommended to no longer exists, and the functions of the disposal fall into this committee in terms of the disposal, but in terms of then the financial element, they sit with a new committee, Strategy, Resources and Performance. That's why the recommendation is drafted to note if the committee feels that it wishes to pass it forward, and I will give the same advice to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee, then I will do that at that point. If this committee feels that it's something that will get the same response, then it does not need to pass it forward if that chooses, because it kind of has that oversight in terms of the disposal. So it is slightly more complicated than just a yes in this position. I did speak to the monitoring officer regarding that.
Thank you, Chair. I see that now. So this is the C, note the disposal to strategy was as requested by the Children and Young People's Committee. So that's encapsulated in that. Would it have been helpful then, and I do appreciate that covers it in a certain way, would it be helpful to say, as it's a recommendation, it's to reject the request? Because it was a request, it wasn't for noting, it was a request. So it's up to us to accept or deny a request.
Again, it's slightly complicated in terms of the referral through and how that splits through. But if the committee is minded not to put that forward to Strategy, Resources and Performance, then that's where it would fall. If you wish to put a different proposal forward, then it would need to follow only kind of constitutional position set out for amendments on that basis. We'll certainly take learnings, and I'll discuss with the monitoring officer. But that was the wording that we decided to put to this committee.
Just one last point then. So the disposal is under the remit of this committee, but the request was the handling of a capital receipt, and the handling of capital I would have thought was an SRMP committee decision, not this. So seeing as why has this committee been involved in this decision and it not gone straight to SRMP?
So again, exactly that point in terms of it's now split in terms of disposal and capital receipt. So it's noting in terms of if this committee wished to take the view not to put that forward on the basis of the advice, then that could do that. However, I would also agree that if they want to put that forward to be a decision for SRMP, that's where that can sit.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the explanation. So if somebody wants that to happen, so Graham Wilson was pursuing this, Councillor Graham Wilson, my apologies, was pursuing this earlier. If he made a proposal on the day based on this information we've just received, that'd be up to him. I don't propose to, but thank you for the explanation.
I'm going to ask the question. So at the moment, we're discussing whether the money received from the sale of this property is ring-fenced. So it goes into the county council's money and is ring-fenced for being used, so can be used for no other purpose than to the safeguarding of the other, and that be reinvested into the other outdoor centres. So we have two outdoor centres. So we have Grafham Water, which so many people are familiar with and is held in such affection, and Burwell, which isn't quite as outdoorsy. So I'm just putting this as context there because I've asked these questions and I found this out, and it's increased my understanding. So Burwell, which is less outdoors and more to do with sort of creative things. So we've got two outdoor centres which have got a lot of affection and everyone wants to support. They're not statutory responsibility of the county council, but that doesn't mean you can't make the decision to support them and to preserve, to put in place a sustainable business model for the future. That is a county council decision. What if we wanted to look, but at the same time, Stivington is going to bring in a certain sum of money, and we've got two other centres which are in need of a good deal of work, it's my understanding. So if it was a straightforward case that the money from one could be used to cover the other two, then that would be a fairly straightforward question. We've seen that under this committee within the strategy rationalisation process, whereby the sale of some buildings is used to reinvest into other office spaces. If this council wants to look at these outdoor centres and how this money can be used, whether or not it is ring-fenced, to support the ongoing future of those outdoor centres, what would be the process by which that would happen?
So I think through you, Chair, I think come back on 2 points. I think firstly, to go back to the point that Councillor Count raises in terms of that complexity of where this decision sits, what I wanted committee to understand was the advice, whether it was to here or to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee, because I wouldn't want you to take a decision thinking that it was ring-fenced when you took the decision. So we're noting my professional advice as Section 151 officer in terms of that. However, the advice will be unchanged for Strategy, Resources and Performance. Coming on to Chair, your specific aspect, in terms of a overarching strategy for the future of outdoor education, that is something that I think is being discussed and is being looked at, but I don't think that, I'm not aware that has been through Children and Young People's Committee, which would then give a very clear steer in terms of the capital programme and how that would be brought forward, and then its relative scoring and how that would be funded, including borrowing, which may have been reduced because we've used this receipt from today's decision if it's passed. If the comment is in terms of is there a step for children and young people to look at, I think that is right.
So children and young people would start the process and then it would come and then it would, is that how that would work?
So sorry, Chair, show you in terms of my understanding, clearly if there is a strategy set out, the corporate landlord embodying the buildings will then move forward in terms of whatever the requirement is in terms of meeting that strategy as part of pulling together the strategy. They'll obviously put together advice as part of that, and then it will enter into the capital program in terms of how that would move forward. And that's no difference whether it is the depot strategy. We've seen that with the office strategy, care strategy. In fact, the next item comes from sustainability strategy. So I think that's the kind of flow in terms of that decision. And then it would find its way into the capital program through either an update or a budget paper to strategy, resources and performance.
Councillor Massini.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was mildly anxious that we were starting to go around in circles a bit, and I was sort of hoping that we could get something by way of a way forward out of this meeting today, because I am very much not inclined to just decline the request and leave it at that, because I don't think that that reflects the will of this administration, not in CYP, not in this committee, not anywhere. Now, Councillor Count will remember me railing at his side of the chamber in full council every time we have a motion that says we want you to take money from this pot and use it for this other pot. Because, you know, we allocate where money goes through the budget process, and this is what we do. Mindful of Michael's advice in that context, it also is very much for CYP to say, we have this business case, this is our priority, and we want you to fund it. And this is the way that I would like that to come forward. So I would like from this committee, if there's any way that either the action log or something else could reflect that we are going to talk to the chair and vice chair of CYP and to the service director, and we will say, we are not SRMP, but you write a budget, you know, you write a budget. It's not a bid. I hate bids. You write a business case to SRMP to say, these are the outdoor centers that we want to fund, and this is how much it's going to cost, and we want you to fund it. And then SRMP will fund it or try to within the correct process. And, you know, if, you know, in the absence of anything else that I haven't understood, this is how I would expect that to go. But I want this to happen. I want this to be in writing. I don't want us to just say, we're declining the request, CYP, sort yourselves out. I don't want that. So I hope that what I've said makes sense and that we can do it.
Chair, yes, it does make perfect sense. I think at the time of the decision back in January 23, clearly there was a clear direction in terms of the aspiration. I believe the aspiration is unchanged, but at the point in time, a strategy over whether more residential, less residential, more specific types of residential or different types of facility, the corporate landlord is maintaining the asset as its present position. But what I was suggesting is that you know, going forward from both a commercial footing in terms of the long-term running of those sites, but also therefore what investment is needed needs a clear strategy setting out in terms of what does that need to look like, which would then drive what's the investment that would be needed, which would then come through the capital program for investment. So certainly, you know, what I am not saying is that there's no money to invest in outdoor education. What I'm saying is the strategy needs to lead that direction to then be able to identify what the need is. And that would be the same for depots and care and all of the types of facilities.
So do I take it that that was a very informative and rounded way of saying yes to what I said?
I think Chair's original recommendation, comments were about the need for children and people to look at this. I think that's Chair, again, without putting words into your mouth, I think that was the ask, and I think that was the ask from Councillor Machini in terms of Chair and Vice Chair. I think it's wider than that. I think it's the committee, but certainly it's not for me to determine what should be invested. There is due process to follow there.
So can we have an action that we even just send a message to, which is a very easy thing to do, just so I think it would be reassuring to have it in the action log. It will be minuted. Is that a thing that is possible? Councillor Hay.
As a member of CYP, I'm disappointed that a decision was taken at CYP to pass the decision on whether or not something could be ring-fenced to strategy and resources, whether it's called strategy and resources or strategy and resources and performance. It's almost as if they've gone up against the recommendation by CYP. I believe that we could alter that recommendation. We could still mention what the officer's recommendation or officer's advice is, but state within there that the decision on that whether or not there should be an exception in this particular case should lie with strategy and resources as requested by CYP.
I think, Chair, the missing piece of the jigsaw is it talks about to support the investment and sustainability. We haven't got a clear direction of what that actually is, whether it's the receipt in the confidential part is sufficient to cover it or insufficient to cover it. We need to have that brought forward to then go into the capital programme. There is certainly no indication in my comments that there is not support for that. It's just setting out that there is a process to follow, and if we veer from that for this, I will then have a number of other services going, well, if I sell that, I want it for that. And that's therefore going to detract from the ability to manage the treasury function. And everybody will be aware of the current level of borrowing costs. We don't want to borrow where we don't need to. But likewise, we need to have a clear set of direction of knowing what we're going to spend and what we're going to get in over that period. But my comments in no way detract from the Children and People's direction about moving forward to support the investment and sustainability of Burwell and Graffham. That's not what my comments are reflecting. It's about good financial management for the organisation.
Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just start with the response to Councillor Anne Hay. Michael, you veered into the actual recommendation was to support the investment and sustainability, and you don't have the information for that. Therefore, we should go down a certain route. But the point Councillor Hay was making, we've heard already, is surely if the proposal was to go to strategy and resources, which is now strategy, resources and performance, surely that should be the place where that decision is made, and you say to them, we don't have that yet. If children and young people want to make a full business plan, put it through the normal way, that's their decision. That wasn't where I was going to come in from, but that's where I'm rowing in behind Councillor Hay. What I'm going to come in from, and I know it's governance, and I know governance can be boring, but governance is also the way that people get included or removed from decisions inadvertently. And when I look at recommendation C, which is on this area, note the disposal to the SRMP committee as requested, we put our hands up yes, no, or abstain. So if we put our hands up yes, then it means we've noticed it. It's not going to S&R committee, SRMP committee. If we were voting against it, we didn't note it, it doesn't mean it goes to SRMP committee. That recommendation, by voting it down, doesn't actually leave it going to SRMP committee. So considering there was a request made, the recommendation should have been, if the SRMP committee cannot consider it, and you saying it has to be here to recommend it to go on, that should have been consider the request and on your recommendation refuse, as noted in 3.1, or on your recommendation accept unless SRMP consider it. Either way, it should have been a yes or a no for us to vote for or against, not just a no, because it was a recommendation from a committee.
Yeah, just to reiterate through you, Chair, my previous response, I wouldn't want this committee to take that decision without knowing my advice to whichever committee, and in this case, strategy, resources and performance. I'm not saying because it's a note that this committee needs to reject it, but it needs to know my advice if this is then moved to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee.
Through you, Chair, then. Are you now saying that this decision does go to the SRMP committee?
I've never said that it doesn't. It's to note, but I'm recognising within that, sorry if my laptop moves in time, within the statement there at 3.1, that it would be first applied through the Treasury Management. I've given the advice that I will give there to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. But if then they said, right, well, we will do that now, we will put it in the Treasury pot, and you go, oh, hang on a second, I wouldn't have taken that decision had I have known that. So that's why it's to note.
Okay, so I'm taking it as confirmation now that the SRMP committee will get a direct question, do you agree to this, yes or no? And then the advice, you'll advise yes or no based on something involved in the papers at SRMP now. Thank you.
I confirm that.
Councillor Moschini.
I am sorry, but I don't want to go away from where I thought this was going. I mean, I'm comfortable with where we are so far, but I wouldn't want SRMP to just get the same thing that we have now with the same advice that you have already given, and that's it. I would like for communication to have already been started so that between SNR and CYP, they know that they should work on a business case so that that will be a proper decision for SRMP to take, not just this, which is only a partial thing.
So one action that I will take is that I will write to the chairs and the service director, the chair and the vice chair and the service director of CYP to instruct that we would welcome the creation of a business model for the outdoor centres. So that can be an action, and I will take that on. Michael, did you?
And Chair, in response to that, I can note that in the Strategy, Resources and Performance update.
Councillor Goldsack.
Most of what I was going to say has been covered, but I'd just like to attempt to simplify this process. And that is that in 3.1, it says if the closure is agreed, a proposal to be made. So I think your last action covers that absolutely implicitly. That you go back to the CYP now, says the decision may or has not been made, and therefore you bring a proposal forward. But I think fundamentally we've got two layered down now. We've integrated a potential CYP request. They may rethink it. We don't know. I'm on CYP, right? With the actual process. The process here is the disposal of a building, right? I think we've got so engrossed in the detail for many good reasons. So hopefully that's a piece of simplification. Are we into debate yet?
Well, are there any other questions? In which case, let's move on to debate. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. Well, I'll keep this ever so simple. I have to agree entirely with the comments made by the local member, Councillor Bywater. It's an absolute delight to see a disposal of a building, notwithstanding any time issues that I think have been valid questions, to come out with a result that looks to me as if it's the perfect solution all round for a disposal of a building. As a previous member of a number of committees, I have visited Stibbington as it was and as it is a couple of times, and this is a particularly splendid building. This part of the site, the other site was a flipping eyesore, but this part. So I'm really glad at the outcome, which is in confidential paper, so we can't talk about. But I think there's a benefit there for all. And can I also say the local impacts of these? That's both from the bidders and from the potential clients and users of it. I think that's all good news for everybody concerned. So I fully support the disposal.
Thank you. Any other item? Would anyone else wish to debate? I also think the proposed use for this is great, and without wishing to add more actions to the action log, it does feel like it would be nice just to everyone to just be made aware when the sale has gone through, if it's gone through, just what the successful sale is. So suggesting some method of communicating that would be really helpful. Okay, in which case, if no one else would like to speak, the committee is I'll move on to the recommendations. The committee is recommended to A, review and approve the recommended offer received after the recent marketing of the property in accordance with section 123 of the Local Government Act. B, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Asset and Procurement Committee to agree on terms, execute the necessary documentation and complete the disposal of the site. And C, note the disposal to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee, as requested by Children and Young People's Committee, noting the section 151 advice as set out at paragraph 3.1. I think I'll take a vote on this. So can I see all those in favour? Excellent. That's unanimous. Thank you. We move on to item number 6, DFE, Department of Education, Capital Investment Bid. Can I ask Chris Ramsbottom?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just noticed this. Well, I forgot it actually. I'm the local member for Whittlesea South on agenda item number 6. I'm also chairman of FDC Planning Committee, or currently so. And it may well come before FDC Planning Committee, as it says so in the agenda pack. So I will be taking no part in the discussion or voting off that, because it obviously will be a bit of interest, won't it? Thank you.
Can I ask if you might consider leaving the room? That would be an ideal for this item. Okay, in which case we will notify you.
Yeah, if I may.
Yes.
You can leave the room and then watch it live on the video. What's the point? No, but it's not.
To sit in the chair.
No.
Democratic Services could answer. There is a good answer.
You're right. You can watch it if you'd like. It's for any influence, but if you'd prefer, as long as you're not voting or participating in any conversation. That's fine. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director for Property Services, to present this report, although it looks as though it's John McMillan, which is on page 49 of your confidential agenda pack. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm John McMillan, and this is Lucy Mont, who's Children's Commissioning Manager.
You just speak a bit more. Could you bring the microphone closer and speak louder, please?
This paper discusses the repurposing of a rural estate property into a children's home suitable for 2 children and their carers. It's similar to the report approved by members at the A&P committee in September last year for 2 houses in Soham. This time we aim to use a vacant bungalow at Ridgley Farm, south of Whittlesea. Bungalow is in poor structural condition, and a structural engineer has advised that it should be demolished. It's not needed for the rural estate, and when it became vacant, it was intended to be sold. In autumn 2024, the Department for Education launched an open application round for capital match funding to provide additional facilities for children with complex needs and challenging behaviour. The Children in Care team asked us to find suitable sites, and the bungalow at Ridgley Farm was deemed by them to be appropriate. We ruled out buying a new property or refurbishing any existing buildings. The site is not suitable for all children in care due to its isolated location, but it would be right for some children, offering a large, well-screened garden not overlooked by other houses. The proposal is to apply for DOE funding, which will be match funded partly using the site's value, which is probably in the region of 150,000. A proposal has been agreed upon by the corporate leadership team, and if the bid to DOE is successful, a business case will be presented to Capital Board and Children and Young People's Committee for final approval. The bid deadline is the end of February. The design build contract for building a new house would be done using a minor works framework overseen by the Council's Education Capital team, who have experience of construction. The house will comply with SUD's Sustainable Urban Drainage System regulations, and we will aim to include air source heat pumps and solar panels, and there will be a high level of insulation as required by current building regs. Like in Soham, the children will be cared for by an externally commissioned provider. The property will be leased to them on a maximum 10-year full repairing and insuring lease. direct members to the recommendations at the front of the report.
Do members have any questions? Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. Good morning, John. Can you tell us, John, when the building became vacant under farm use, please, and what the time delay was between that period and this process?
So I haven't got the dates exactly at my fingertips, but the previous tenant passed away in 2021, and then for a period we let it to Peterborough City Council, I think it was, for they had a need for a home for an adult, an emergency need. So that carried on for about a year. And that's about as far as I can go. There haven't been any significant delays other than this DOV funding came out at the end of last summer and the autumn.
Okay, well, the reason we're asking is very similar to the previous conversations, which is, so from what you're saying, and I'm accepting, I'm not holding you to the exact date here, but it's about 2.5 years of time. So if the DFE hadn't have come along, would this building have sat empty for 2.5 years with no improvements being made to an asset of the council?
No, we would have sold it. So we were in the process of getting ready to sell it after the farm tenant had passed away, and then out of the blue, as it were, there was an urgent need to house an adult, and so we didn't proceed with the sale. We let it to Peterborough City Council for a period. They housed this adult. They carried out works to the house themselves and so on. I can inform the committee by email. I can look at the exact dates to see if there are any lessons we can learn from.
I think there's a start of a story here. I think we touched on it in a couple of other things. Councillor Gough and Councillor Count certainly raised points on it. I think all the steps taken here sound good and valid, right? Supporting the need of the adult from Peterborough. There's a business opportunity there. There's a people opportunity there. I think that sounds sensible, as does the plans for this. I was fully in support of those for the other two sites that you mentioned that were debated last September. I think that's a good opportunity way forward. What I'm really questioning this is the management of the asset for the 4-year period since the tenant sadly passed away, and where we're at today. That seems quite a long while to market 150 grand's worth of bungalow. That's how I feel. So yes, an email I'd be happy, Chair, through you. I'd be happy with back through you and through the members of the committee. But I think it's worth an understanding.
Councillor Beckett.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering if you're able to tell us a little bit more about the bungalow in question.
You need to speak a little bit more loudly, sorry.
Microphones are very quiet these days. I was wondering whether you could tell us a little bit more about the bungalow that's due to be demolished. I'm somebody that quite likes heritage and saving buildings, so I hate to see one unnecessarily demolished. I don't know how old it is, or I know the report says there are structural issues, but is it a particularly old building or notable in any other way?
Yeah. No, it's, I think it was built in 1962. It's a bungalow. It has broken its back, being the technical term that the engineer used. Looking on file, we were monitoring it in 2020, and then we had another report in 2024 when the engineer said it requires mini piling and it'll cost quite a lot of money, and you're better off starting afresh.
So just coming back on that quickly, if that's okay, Chair, that it's not one that would ever be suitable for listing or anything else like that. It's not of architectural merit.
No
Okay,
merit.
thank you.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for noting my concerns on the previous items about social isolation for our young people. So the explanation is good to hear. I think from a member point of view, just touching on Councillor Beckett, really. John sent me some information outside the meeting about this property, what it looked like and where it was located. And for not being a local member, I think, we should be getting that with the reports. I think we should be getting maybe photographic evidence or certainly map references and understanding where these locations are, because purely simply saying, oh, it's a farm in the middle of Whittlesea is no use to me. So I appreciate you supplying that information outside the meeting, but when we're making decisions on our properties, it's good to have a really good understanding about them. Thank you.
That's a really helpful and good suggestion. Alongside sort of classing Burwell as an outdoor centre, it confused me until I asked the question, and then actually you get a far greater understanding by having those extra bits of detail. Councillor Count.
Yes, thank you. It was on the same line. It was the one comment I made before going into detail about this report is that I tried to look up Richley Farm. It doesn't come up on Google Maps. I managed to find the road, but you couldn't find where it was. I've actually used the farm mapping service to actually find out where it is, and then trying to get on Street View and trying to get a picture. And all of that was unnecessary work. It should have been contained. But the direction of travel for my concerns was being a Fenland member, knowing some, I'm not on the planning committee, but I have been in the past. I know some of our planning policies. I was looking at thinking about something like, is this a suitable location for town children? We don't know how challenged they are or challenging behaviour. It's mentioned in the report there's some challenging behaviour. Are they isolated, or actually is there difficulty so extreme that isolation is the best thing for them and for the local community? And there's no information on that. But having looked at the bungalow, it is you would agree it's in the middle of nowhere, I think. In the middle of nowhere, is that the right place for this? I don't know without the CYP report. So I think that is a useful question because I think this is on the basis of CYP agreeing that is a very good question to ask them. Is this a suitable location? But I'd like to know, have you had any planning discussions with Fenland? Because that bungalow, from what I've seen, if I've managed to identify the correct one, is not very large, and we're looking at 10 children being here. So two. Where did I get 10 from? Sorry, my apologies. Two. So 2-bedroom. Okay. So there's a good chance of a replacement building then at that site. So, but that would have been useful. So, am I right in thinking that this now goes to children for the full plan, and they would be the ones that answer the question about the suitability of the location? Or perhaps you can add to that here today. Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer some of that question. I'll pass over to John for the planning piece. So with regards to the location, we will do a full location risk assessment with the provider market, which we did with the Soham homes, the farmhouses. Social care colleagues and commissioning colleagues have reviewed the site, and we deem it to be appropriate, largely because it's remote. That's the reason we are considering this site. So the 2 young people, or maximum 2, that we would be accommodating in this provision will have come out from typically either a secure unit or perhaps a tier 4 hospital bed, and therefore this isn't the long-term home for these young people. So it's really important to note this is to give them a safe space to regulate, to find their feet, I suppose, since coming out of the previous arrangement that they'd been in, before we move them on to a more appropriate setting for them. So it's to give them that space to be able to regulate.
Account.
Yeah, I see in the description that these children may have been or at risk of being deprived of their liberty. But if they are literally in the middle of nowhere, despite being able to, shall we say, play in the fields outside, realistically, this is a deprivation of their liberty, or an element of they will be taken by their carers for days out under supervision.
Yeah, so there'll still be opportunity for those young people. Certainly the plans that we're looking to build in terms of feasibility study is to ensure that the space in the garden is suitable provision for them, that they can still be outside. They won't be shut in the building by any means, but the workers that are there with them will be able to support them and accommodate them. And when they're ready, those young people will be able to integrate out into the community with the support workers.
John, if you want to answer briefly on planning, because as before.
On planning, we've appointed a consultant to do design and build and all the planning investigations as well, and that's started, and they will get preamp advice before they make the bid to the DOV.
Councillor Beckett.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the answers on the young people. That was really good to hear. As somebody that grew up in the middle of nowhere, it didn't feel too much like being in prison. So I hope the young people will, seek to take advantage of the space. I was just wondering whether any consideration has been given to or needs to be given to homeschool transport. Are these youngsters that will be, attending a school? Is it something that's going to be a homeschool transport issue in the future? And is that something we have considered or need to consider?
That will entirely depend on the matching of those young people. So we've said a maximum of 2. It's likely to start off only as 1 young person. And typically these children have come out of hospital or a secure setting and therefore will not be attending school. As their circumstances change and as they move on, that may become something that would be considered, but not in the immediate.
Are there any other questions? In which case, would anybody like to debate this item? Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, it's I know we've got raised some concerns here, and I think it's important to note that, but we all know as members that, secure accommodation and looking after some of these severely vulnerable individuals is hugely expensive. So it's really good to see, I think, that we're thinking outside that box and moving forward and how we can better support our young people rather than just sending them off to the next available secure unit that may or may not be nearby to this location or more importantly to their carers or their next of kin. So I think this is good progress, but we do need to monitor what children are going there and their needs really. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bywater, and I completely agree. I think this is a really good use of assets, but at the same time, it's a new approach, and so taking out, without unnecessary delays, but carefully monitoring it and doing it sensibly in a sensible period of time is the way to go. Anybody else wish to speak? In which case, I will move to the recommendations. The committee is being asked to A, agree to demolish a failing farm bungalow and rebuild a new house on the site for use as a children in care residence. B, agree to the lease of the new house to an external service provider for a period of up to 10 years. C, delegate authority for awarding and executing construction contracts starting in 2025 and extension periods to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the chairs and vice chairs of the following committees: Children and Young People, Assets and Procurement. Are there any objections, or can we take that as carried unanimously? Excellent. In which case, we'll take that as carried unanimously. Thank you very much. It's still 11:20. Right, number 7, Crescent Centre report. Can I ask that Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director for Property Services, to present this report, which is on page 55 of your confidential agenda pack?
Thank you, Chair. This paper proposes to transfer a lease from Cambridge County Council to Peterborough City Council. This is a legacy issue that should have been completed in 1998 when Peterborough City Council became a unitary authority. The lease remains registered under CCC at the Land Registry, which is now problematic for Peterborough City Council subletting and allowing the building to be used as a dementia resource centre. Item 2.4 covers the order under which the property would be transferred, and PCC have been managing the Crescent as their leasehold since 1998, but it is still registered to CCC at the Land Registry, and PCC is now requesting for the devolution of title to them. There is no evidence available with our records of any officer delegated authority to agree to the property transfer from 1998. Our monitoring officer's advice was that as there isn't an existing delegated authority, it is a key decision and will require the committee's approval today. We have had Pathfinder legal advice, and this is their advised way of resolving the issue. There are no financial implications other than the shared legal costs between the two parties. In conclusion, CCC and PCC have acted on the basis that the intention for the sublease should have transferred to PCC in 1998. Therefore, we ask committee to agree to legally formalise the transfer of the Crescent Centre leasehold interest from CCC to PCC, which then enables it to be registered in Peterborough City Council's name at the Land Registry. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Wilson.
I agree that this is a good idea, and I note that PCC is asking for it, but what's in it for us? It's just going to cost us £1,500, which we could do other things with. Why should we have anything to do with this?
I think the main issue here is under the order in 1996, it should have been transferred. So there is a requirement for us to transfer it now. I'll read the order if it helps. The order said that Cambridgeshire, in brackets, City of Peterborough, structural boundary and electoral changes order 1996, the reorganisation of the Peterborough City Council, city boundary meets property interests which fall into certain boundary areas would be transferred from CCC to PCC. So it's something that should have happened. For whatever reason, back in 1998, it didn't. We're unsure. And like I say, we've checked our records to see if there was anything on the files without finding anything. So it's something that we need to do.
Councillor Massini.
Thank you. Just by way of personal opinion, I mean, legally holding on to something that everybody else assumes you've disposed of ages ago does not sound to me like a good idea. Not unless we're planning to go under PCC's nose and sell it or something. I mean, I don't know, but I personally would not want to go there. But my actual question is twofold. Number one, can we have absolute assurance that given that we remained sort of legally on the hook for this place for a lot longer than we thought, that we haven't actually had any financial implications adverse to us? Have we maintained something? Have we done something with this building? Have we, and question number two, with the understanding that it may be indeed possible that another such process like in 1992 will happen again at some point in the next 5 years or so, can we just learn all the lessons that we need to learn and make sure that this doesn't happen again? And essentially, can we close any future loophole on something like this? Because I think, finding yourself 10 years down the line, not having done something that you thought you'd legally done, I mean, I can see all sorts of, and if you might even be, taken to court over something that you didn't know. So can we just make sure that people take this opportunity to, and should, not have this kind of thing repeated? Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, if I can answer the first question and pass the second one to Julia. In all intents and purposes, since 1998, both parties have treated this as it had happened. So we have had no involvement with the building at all. The only issue that we come here today for is it didn't physically get registered and transferred. Since 1998, both parties have acted as though it had done so. So there's been no financial impact on this council.
And can I ask, are we certain there's no other properties out there like this?
Yeah, we've had a look back recently. Obviously, this come to bear. We're confident that there aren't. The process that we're undertaking at the minute in terms of transferring all our lease documentation from existing databases into the Concerto system will and would raise this in the future if there are any, but we're confident that there aren't. This seems to be an anomaly that is a one-off.
Is that via going through the land registry, or how, are you literally going through every single property in Peterborough?
Unfortunately, I don't think we'd quite have the resource to do that at this time. Obviously, these properties transferred nearly 30 years ago. So we have asked the question of Peterborough because they are obviously sort of rationalising their estate currently. We suspect that what happened, the freehold actually transferred, and this is a sublease. So it looks, or it appears that it was probably an oversight at the time because they were probably having to transfer so many different properties across, and the lease was just overlooked. So we suspect that's probably what happened at the time. And hopefully there won't be any others that sort of come out of the woodwork, but we can't guarantee that 100%, but we would like to think that there won't be many more.
Any other questions? Would anybody like to debate this item? In which case we'll move to the recommendations. The committee is recommended to agree to legally formalise the transfer of the Cresset Centre leasehold interest to Peterborough City Council from Cambridgeshire County Council. Are we unanimous in agreement that we should do this? Thank you. Was that being unanimous? Being unanimous. I didn't indicate whether there was a vote. I think I should have asked if there are any objections. Sorry. Right. So we are unanimous in agreement. We'll move on to item number 8, the business plan and budget. The scrutiny of the draft business plan and budget will be presented by Michael Hudson, Executive Director of Finance and Resources.
Thank you, Chair. The overall business and budget plan was presented to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on the 17th of December. As part of those draft proposals, it was then recommended that scrutiny was taken place through the Service and Policy Committees throughout January, which is one of these committees, and therefore why you see this here before you today. The purpose being that if there is any feedback from this committee to then inform the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee meeting on the 28th of February before it makes recommendations to full council in setting the business and budget plan and council tax on the 11th of February. So at the end of this process, I will just, Chair, if it's okay, do a quick summary of what I think the feedback is so that we're all clear, that there's no misinterpretation in terms of any delay between now and the minutes, because I'm conscious that the Strategy and Resources Performance meeting is only next week. So just turning to the report itself very quickly, section 2 sets out the council-wide position. This was the 17th of December paper, so that is pre the provisional settlement that was announced on the 18th of December. At that point, £75 million worth of pressures, with just over £41 million worth of funding identified, meant that there was a £34.2 million overall savings required across the council. Section 3 sets out the impact for areas covered by this committee, with table 4.1 and in particular the appendix 1 setting out the detail of both the pressures, the growth, investment and any savings and incomes proposals. Number of issues within that are then flagged, for example, the £1.5 million office improvement and rationalisation programme. That builds upon the plans that were brought previously to this committee, in terms of a range of the office estate that the team has been working through this year and continues to work through. A number of factors, though, just to make this committee aware of, as part of that process and moving forward, certainly in the last few months, we have identified that lessons learnt in terms of the time to dispose of those assets and assumptions, particularly around planning. And of course, also on the 16th of December, government released the devolution white paper, and the move forward with local government reform is something that we now need to consider in terms of the asset planning and look at the need for any revision to that. So I think it's fair to say that it will be difficult to deliver the full 1.25 in year. And that's since that statement, but clearly we are looking at alternatives. And you will see also that there is investment in the estate within the growth and investment lines within the Appendix 1 to reflect the investments that's required into the estate. There is also a reference to the council's housing company, wholly owned company, This Land, reflecting the updates that are being presented to Strategy, Resources and Performance through the Integrated Finance Monitoring Report, but also to this committee through the performance report during the year. There are also savings proposed around digital change, in particular the challenge of contracts and licenses, expected to yield just over 830,000 across the next 3 years. Table 4 sets out the net budget, therefore, for property and procurement, as well as its medium-term financial planned net budgets. And Table 5 sets out the capital. Again, further detail of this is in the appendix. That sets out the schemes at paragraph 5.1, and the appendix also makes reference to the specific farms that have got capital investment through that as well. I'll pause there, Chair, and I'll happily take questions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Just a couple of points I want to raise. Property rationalisation, given the agenda item that we saw earlier on today and the fluctuating market that we've got in relation to property around the county, how confident are you that that £1.5 million saving can be achieved in the coming year? And the second question I've got is in relation to page 76, table 1, which talks about the Executive Director of Finance and Resources, the budget for the team. I'd like to understand the inflationary pressures for staffing costs over the next MTFS, over the next 5 years, because it seems to go up significantly. And I'd just like to understand your workings for it, really, is probably the best way to describe it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. In relation to the first issue, as noted, I would say that is a significant ask now, particularly given local government reform and what that means in terms of some of our assets and their locality, and the need to look again at that once there is greater clarity in terms of that. I think we've heard today a number of times in terms of other assets where the questions have been asked about what others are doing on that. I think there are lessons to be learned as we're progressing forward with what is quite a large asset disposal, and the assumptions around that and around the retained buildings. For example, one in particular where we had assumed a shorter period of planning consultation that actually will now take place, and that has actually added a further 6 months into the programme. So again, good learning, but I think it does reflect that I think there is probably at least £500,000 worth of pressure, I think, that we now need to look at these savings proposals overall in relation to that item. In relation to the staffing budget, the staffing inflation line, I'm just going to turn to Tom because I know this answer, and for the life of me, it is not coming to the front of my mind. So apologies for that, committee, but hopefully Tom will be able to. If not, we'll do written response.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bywater. It is as straightforward as a 3.5% assumed uplift year by year across the planning period. That same assumption has been used across the whole of the council and is probably consistent with much of the sector. We've actually seen larger increases than that in recent years, with pay focused on the bottom pay scales as to kind of keep up with national living wage. So that's the council's best expectation living forward. It's probably worth saying as well that is for the entirety of the directorate that Michael leads. So that there is across the kind of IT, property, and then the finance and procurement workforce is captured by that number.
Yeah, you say 3.5%, but look, maths is not my strong point. I certainly don't profess to be an accountant, but looking at those numbers there, so 611, then 1243 the next year, and then it doesn't look like 3.5% to me.
So I think that should be 3.5%. Broadly speak, that will be a staffing budget of about 15 million, which is probably about right for those services. But we'll just double check that as well, Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, to a casual observer, looking at those numbers, I just think maybe there should be some sort of explanation that sits alongside that because, they're big numbers.
Yes, I also queried that in a pre-meet. Yep. Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Count.
Thank you. It's on the same table. Am I right in thinking that staffing inflation used to be held centrally for the county?
That is correct, and so that's been a change in treatment either this year or last year. So we have allocated it to directorates, partly reflecting member feedback. I can't remember if Councillor Count recalls it, but looking at the library's budget in a different committee, there was a query around, well, surely we'll see an inflation on the staffing costs there. So we've now tried to apportion it to directorates to give a clearer sense of where there's that budget growth.
Thank you, Chair. On the just before, as we move through, there is a further question here, but just to save time, just to let you know, I've asked many questions offline on this committee paper and on other committee papers. I'll be voting against recommendations. You'll expect the Conservatives to bring forward an amendment at the full council meeting. I do have another question. So it's the line above, Executive Director. It has a gross budget of 27,000, net budget of 27,000, but then it's got minus 223,000 in the first year and the second year, and then on. Just what does that represent? How is there a gross in this particular directorate? How is there a gross budget of only 27,000? What are these minus 200s coming from? So is it like that? You said there's a 15 million pound staffing budget, and virtually all of that is funded from elsewhere, and you're seeking to remove some of that budget? Page 76. It's the line directly above staffing inflation, which is the £611,000 figure. It's got a gross budget of 27,000. Then the net budgets in all the years moving forwards are looking at numbers like minus 223, minus 323.
Sorry, Councillor Count, could you just give me the page number again? I don't think it is 76.
Page 76. Section 3. D, finances and resources, table 1, revenue.
It's the confidential page 76, isn't it, Steve?
Have you got confidential pages?
Well, I know,
Within
but
the
no,
confidential
that's what I mean.
agenda
You're looking at.
Yes,
So-
yes.
so-
I have a confidential pack. This
So
is
it's
a
not,
confidential
it
paper.
won't be page 76 on Tom's, that's what I mean.
It's actually marked. Yeah, so it won't be. So it's section 3,
Yep,
D,
I've got it.
finance and resources, table 1.
Yeah, so looking across those two tables, which I think the pages 60 and 61 in the public pack. So the total gross budget, you can see right at the bottom of that table for next year is 43.4 million. And then the net budget, so the difference between those two, so deducting the income is 28 million. And that's how we get to a net budget of 15.3 million at the bottom of that table. That table's quite helpful because it shows you where the income is clustered across the directorate. And as you'd expect, there is significant income in property services, for instance, from the County Farms estate, in lead authority services, where we operate some services on behalf of a full council partnership, and from the investment activity as well, property investments, one of the principal areas. So what you'll see from that is that there, obviously in the subsequent table 2, we've needed to inflate all of our staffing budgets by that 3.5% assumption, but some of that staffing will be funded by external income, whether that's from other councils, whether it's trading with schools, or activity that is commercially related and is generating income. Does that help, Councillor Count, or not?
So if I understand you correctly, on that table that I was referring to, the single budget line at the top, 27 minus 223, etc. That's the gross budget, but a lot, because there's a lot of income coming in. But I can't look at it line by line. A lot of these reductions are the incomes in different lines that are not directly attributed there, but apportioned to the top line.
Yeah, so I think it may be helpful to get a written reply on this. The income is shown in the kind of second column of numbers in that figure headed income budget. I think what you may have detected in years 2 onwards, where there is then a negative budget on the executive director, it's likely, I think we've probably parked one of the future year savings that hasn't been apportioned to an individual line yet, has sort of been held at Michael's level for that to be allocated at a later date. But we can confirm that in writing later.
Thank you. To be helpful, if you could put that through Stephen Howarth, so I've got a combined budget picture. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comment? In which case, Mike will summarise any points.
Thank you, Chair. I think one main point to feed back to strategy, resources and performance, and that is the committee noted the risk in the coming year of delivery of the 1.5 million saving target around property rationalisation. I do also note that there are 2 written responses, one in relation to the Executive Director Finance and Resources line, and the second in relation to the inflation line below, but we would not note those to the committee, but we will provide a written response to this committee on those 2 items.
Last chance to make comment. In which case, the report recommendations are: the committee is recommended to A, consider and scrutinise the proposals relevant to this committee within the business plan and budget 2025 to 26 to 2029 to 30, put forward by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on the 17th of December 2024. B, recommend changes and or actions for consideration by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee at its meeting on 28 January 2025 to enable a business plan and budget to be proposed to full council on 11 February 2025. And C, receive the fees and charges schedule for this committee included at Appendix 2. Let us move to a vote. Can I see all those in favour? Can I see all those against? And any abstentions? No. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item. Item number 9, the Corporate Performance Report. Can I ask Richard Springbett, Governance and Performance Manager, to present this report, which is on page 93 of your confidential agenda pack.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this report covers the period of Q2 2024-2025 up to the 30th of September 2024. Current performance of available indicators monitored by this committee are as follows. So there's 2 red, 1 amber, 7 green, and 1 contextual KPI. The 2 indicators that are red are Indicator 169, which is the percentage of contract waivers submitted less than 5 days before their proposed start date, and Indicator 204, which is the annual forecast of the gross income from our commercial investment as a percentage of initial investment. Commentary for both of these indicators can be found in Appendix A. I just wanted to bring your attention to a couple of other points highlighted in the paper. The first one is the way in which the council delivers social value through procurement is changing. This will impact Indicator 205, which is the amount of social value achieved. The council has a new arrangement with Match My Project, which is to be launched in April 2025. This arrangement moves away from the monetarisation towards a towards a tool to deliver place-based social value. Officers will now explore suitable alternative indicators that can be reported to this committee. Section 4 of this paper outlines the approach to performance management for this committee. A new set of indicators are currently being developed, and these indicators will be communicated with members ahead of them being presented at this committee. The indicators will be selected to enable members of this committee to have the best overview of performance in line with our strategic ambitions. These indicators will, where possible, be benchmarked against national and regional performance and set appropriate targets to allow fair scrutiny. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm happy to take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes, I would like to, in which case I would like to ask a question. So it's the amount of social value achieved, which obviously, if we look at the graph, looks absolutely amazing. But can we get, you said it was changing. Can we get further? Can we dig further into that and what is meant? Because it's a very big term, which I don't think, which sounds really good, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We'll take that into consideration as we sort of develop that and make sure the definition is really clear on what we're trying to measure and how we're measuring it.
And so the value of it has gone up in a very large amount. Is that because it's being monitored? What is the reason for that? Or the amount, the sum in the graph?
I don't have the specific numbers on why that performance has gone up as much as it has, but I can get that as a written answer for you to get that detail for you, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Machini.
Sorry, just to follow up, I think it would be useful to have that as an update to the way that the value is presented in the paper. And if we could have the action log refer to that, that would be quite useful, because I don't want it to fall by the wayside and people forget the written answer and then it just keeps being presented in the same way. So if we could make sure that we do that as an ongoing thing, that would be more useful, maybe.
So what are we doing as an ongoing thing? Just, yeah.
No, I think there is some feedback as to how, when there is a change, this is presented in the paper and in the graph to sort of give people a more immediate understanding of what's going on. And I'd like, given we get this periodically, that the next one should be done in a different way. And for that to be formally recorded, that this will be done to the paper next time it comes to us, as opposed to we get a written answer and the next time is still the same, right? Assuming that makes sense. It makes sense to me.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll so just to confirm, we'll provide a written answer, but then also in the paper further explain that next time it comes to committee.
It might be helpful to circulate that to committee members in advance, what the new approach is going to be, so that we can sort of identify whether we would like it tweaked in any way in advance of the committee, just to make sure there's as much clarity as possible.
Yep, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Ray.
Could I clarify whether these figures, they're percentages? So they're percentages of a rolling total, or are they percentages of the expenditure during that quarter?
It's spending per quarter. We could potentially deliver it via quarterly or an average over the year. Yes. Okay, I'll speak to the officer that's sort of accountable for this area and see what we can do and provide that.
So a lot of the fluctuation may well be due to large expenditures in a particular quarter that are or are not outside the county.
Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. My one's on the narrative. The narrative is in 3.3. I won't help you with the page of my pack because I'm using the wrong pack, a confidential one. It talks about the performance of Triangle Solar Farm and other accommodation bookings, etc. But I want to draw specific attention to the Cromwell Leisure Park. It says 2 units remain unlet at Cromwell Leisure Park. A revised marketing approach is underway and has attracted some new interest. Right. I'm working from memory, so I might be a little bit out here, but my memory says probably 18 months, a year and a half ago, a lot of attention was paid to the Cromwell Leisure Park and the feeling that the marketing approach at that point in time was not the right way to market it, and a new more localized approach was going to be used. I think that was about a year and a half ago. Is this, I don't have the dates, but do you recall any of that? Can you find out any of that? Is this referring to a revised marketing approach that was asked for all that time ago, or because there were changes then and we're trying another approach now? So where are we? What are the changes in the marketing approach and when did they happen? Because this is a long while now.
If Chris could speak.
Thank you, Councillor Count. The revised marketing, as you said, was previously discussed at a previous committee. We have both marketing now, both nationally and through a local agent as well, so a local emphasis, which I think was the point raised at the previous committee in terms of the gap in the marketing previously. In terms of the exact dates, I will have to come back and refer and inform you of those changes and when those happen, but we are marketing nationally and locally through several agents.
Thank you, Chair. It certainly wasn't the last committee, so it seems strange that unless somebody's got a memory here of what's going on, so the dates would be really useful, because if it is a long while ago, which I seem to think, and both the localised and the national approach haven't worked, then we've got to revise what we're looking at and what we're trying to do here. So, you know, we can't just carry on trying to do the same thing, but yeah, if we could take that as an action, supply those notes, to be dates, it'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Just one further clarity for comfort. We are looking at this as an individual piece of work in terms of exactly what you say, assessing what's gone before, what's happening now, and reassessing the site as a whole.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Goldsack.
So I was trying to make sure I've got some degree of understanding of it before I ask the question, but I'll give it a go. I'm referring to indicator 204 on my pack. It's page 107, but I think that is also the audit pack, the confidential pack. Couple of questions on this. I'm trying to understand the narrative on the commentary about the wholly owned company, This Land, and where it's at and where it sits in which box, because I don't find that particularly clear. And the second point on this was really, if that's not entirely the housing investment, what other housing investment is it that we've got?
Just to Councillor Goldsack's second point, so that it is the entirety of the housing investment block would be the whole relating to the wholly owned company.
Sorry, question's gone then. So it's really the commentary. Can I just add to that, Tom? And that is that I have this morning asked the Chief Executive for a more detailed operational update on what's going on with This Land. All members recently would have received a Member of Public's letter, which has been appropriately dealt with by the Section 1, the legal officer. But I do think there are operational issues that we as members are unaware of, and we face questions on, and we're seeing the iteration of them here. And I'm just trying to make sure that all the parts of the jigsaw come together so that I've got a firm understanding. I also add that for the reasons. Well, no, I won't go into here because I think the degree of that could be straying into confidentiality. So I'll leave that.
I guess the only thing to add on this point is that the shareholder subcommittee sits for the first time next week and is picking up some of those matters in more detail.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Goldsack.
Sorry, I'm firing now. On a similar note, but not to do with this land. These your colleague said were quarter of a quarter. Have we made any changes in our investment approach that's affected our return? So I remember a few years ago now, we had a complete review of our ESG situation as to what we were doing and how we would approach it. And there were subsequent changes accordingly. But I'm wondering whether we've got any of those recently well, it's fairly obvious that we've got one area that's really greatly performing and three areas that are underperforming.
Just to kind of cover off the main developments in this area, I don't think there's any policy changes of the type that Councillor Goldsack's referring to. I think the main thing is that the council isn't undertaking new commercial investments that sort of reflects the PWLB guidelines. So in the property investment, housing investment and collective investment fund category, we are through active management trying to optimize the existing investments and exposures that we've got. For renewable energy, of course, there are some assets that have been completed in during this financial year, which that is impacting what we're seeing in that category, of course, positively going forward.
Are there any other questions? Would anybody like to make any comment in the debate? In which case, this committee is asked to note the performance information and act as necessary. I think we have done so. It is 12 o'clock, but we have one hopefully very brief final item on this agenda. So if we move on to number 10, committee agenda plan and appointments to internal advisory group. With the Democratic Services Officer, update us on any changes to the published report.
Thank you, Chair. The first item on the agenda is the agenda plan, apologies, to which there are no reports to updates to report. The other item is the need to appoint a chair and vice chair to the shareholder subcommittee. Chair, can you please advise on the nominations?
Do I have any nominations for the chair of the shareholder subcommittee? Do I have any nominations for the chair of the shareholder subcommittee?
Yes, Chair. David Ambrose Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Count. Are there any other nominations? Thank you. Are there any seconders for either nomination?
Happy to second David Ambrose Smith.
Thank you. And you will second myself, in which case we will have to move to a vote. Do I take the vote? Is that correct? Okay. So can I see all those in favour of David Ambrose Smith to be the chair of the shareholder subcommittee? And can I see all those in favour of myself, Councillor Hathorn, to be chair of the shareholder subcommittee? Thank you. And can I see a nomination for a vice chair of the shareholder subcommittee? Can I propose Councillor Machini? Is there a seconder for that proposal? We have a Councillor Wilson. Can I see, are there any other proposals for this, for the vice chair of the subcommittee? In which case, Councillor Machini is the vice chair. Are we happy with that? Excellent. So it is recommended that the committee, so the report recommendations, so the chair for the shareholder subcommittee is Councillor Ross Hathorn, the vice chair for the shareholder subcommittee is Councillor Machini. It is recommended that the committee A, review its agenda plan attached at Appendix 1, B, appoint the chair and vice chair of the shareholder subcommittee for the remainder of the municipal year, and C, note any appointments to the outside bodies and internal advisory groups and panels as necessary. Are we all in favour, or are there objections? I will take that as unanimous. Thank you very much. Members, that is the final item on today's agenda. Our next meeting is scheduled for 7th March at 10 a.m. Thank you very much, and I declare this meeting closed.